Africa is a continent of vast beauty and significant resources with a rich and diverse history and population. Africa has been known to be very rich in resources such as gold, diamond, oil, natural gas, copper, uranium, and others, with almost every country having a deposit of natural resources. Despite this, Africa is the poorest, as its resources continue to enrich other parts of the world. The region is alive with the agency of her people, captured through resistance, restoration, and ongoing resilience, despite challenges that the region continues to face. High levels of violence against women and girls undermines the very fabric of African societies. What is violence against women and girls? The Maputo Protocol defines violence against women in the following way. Violence against women means all acts perpetrated against women which cause or could cause them physical, sexual, psychological, and economical harm, including the threat to take such acts or to undertake the imposition of arbitrary restrictions on or deprivation of fundamental freedoms in private or public life in peacetime and during situations of armed conflict or of war. Many civil society organizations across the region have been involved in a range of programs towards ending violence against women and girls. The African Union has taken a number of important steps to respond to this scourge, notably harnessing heads of state leadership and making the decision to develop a convention on violence against women and girls at its summit in February 2023. Development partners such as UN agencies and others have embarked on partnership and programs on violence against women and girls across the region. Despite all these critical efforts, violence against women and girls remain unacceptably high as the most normalized form of brutality and human rights violation impacting on individual girls, women's relationship, health and lives, and at the same time undermining the entire fabric of our societies. It scars girls, boys, families, and destroys healthy human relationships. We know that boys who grow up in houses where they witness their mother being abused are more likely to abuse themselves, and that girls growing up in such homes are more likely to find themselves in abusive relationships as adults. We have to stop this intergenerational cycle by asking bold questions. What are we not understanding? How can we strengthen our regional response? Let's look back to history to understand all of this. The age of modern colonialism started about 1500 when Europeans discovered a sea route around Africa's southern coast in 1488 and that of America in 1492. It was at this time as well that the slave trade began, forming the foundation of modern racism. Between 1501 and 1866, approximately 12.5 million African slaves were taken on slave ships from Africa across the Atlantic in the most inhumane and brutal conditions. The second wave of colonial expansion began during the 19th century, centering around the African continent in what is called the Scramble for Africa. European nations such as Britain, France, Portugal, and Spain sliced up the continent, creating arbitrary borders and claiming large sections of land for themselves. This resulted in extreme forms of control and violence, such as the practices of amputations, where soldiers were instructed to return with severed limbs for every bullet they shot, forced labor, and murder. This artificial border split cultural groups, resulting in fierce ethnic tensions that have continued to have devastating ramifications throughout the continent. Indigenous political, economic, and social institutions were decimated, as were traditional ways of life, which were deemed inferior. Moreover, many of the economic policies that the colonizers imposed on the people of Africa prioritized the extraction of resources from colonized land to benefit the colonizers. The resulting economic and social inequalities persist to this day and contribute to the perpetuation of violence against women and girls. With the introduction of cash crops, women's power and economic autonomy was snatched from them. Men benefited from the exclusion of women from the global marketplace and unremunerated labor. Over the past century, across Africa, struggles for independence have been waged and countries have been decolonized. The land and the political systems have been taken back and independence from colonial rule has taken root. The process of decolonization stretched over a long period of time. In some colonies, changes were accompanied by violence and war, and others gained their independence peacefully. This shows the resilience of African societies and oppressed people to reclaim, rebuild, restore, and reshape their own destinies. Despite countries in Africa gaining their independence, new instruments were used to continue to exert power over African countries. Neocolonialism is the use of political and economic pressures by more developed nations, especially former colonial powers, to dominate and control less developed countries, which are often former colonies. This violent history of colonialism, slavery, and dispossession has had a profound impact on the African continent. But Africans over the length and breadth of our continent fought for the right to self-determination and the right to sovereignty. Africa-driven responses, Africa-wide visions, Africa-centered approaches are key to effectively end violence against women and girls. This means responding to the material realities of poverty and inequality in our societies as this drive violence against women and girls. This means responding to the psychological legacy of colonialism that perpetuate racism and ideologies of inferiority, which then feeds into levels of violence against women and girls in our communities. This means changing systems and ways of doing things that do not place the lived experience of the victim at the center. This means embracing the diversity of our roots and drawing on that as a strength to forge new social and economic relationships. As Africans, we see and experience our common human beingness through each other. As Africans, we believe in Ubuntu, caring and supportive communities that raise confident girls and boys to take their rightful place in society. We will use our history to co-create an Africa free from the shackles of racism, patriarchy, and any ideas that entrench the violence of inequality, discrimination, and inferiority. Together as Africans, we can end violence against women and girls on every corner of our continent.